Sorry, there was a balloon that just got flown out of somebody's window,
It's
which was
okay.
very disconcerting. Um, oh, it's landed on somebody's balcony. Brilliant.
Is a
Uh,
balloon okay?
well, it's a red balloon, and it was sort of, yeah, that was very worrying. Sorry. Um,
It's fine. Hey, welcome to the show. Today I'm here with Danielle Vass. She's going to tell us about her extraordinary career, why she turned down Twitter, why she left Facebook, some of the issues that she's still facing in the industry as a woman, and some of the amazing advice she can give us. Hello, Danielle. How are you?
I'm really good. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting us.
Okay, so let's start from the beginning. Just could you give me a brief overview of your career?
I originally started out, I did a degree in computer science or computing at Plymouth University. The university was interesting because in my second year, we actually had an Android module, and we also had an after school or like a Wednesday afternoon activity teaching us iOS development. And at the time, we were one of the only universities in Europe that actually offered that. So I kind of started fairly early on in my career focusing or enjoying mobile development. When I was in Bath and Bristol, I took 1 day leave per week. So I was only working for 4 days a week. And that 1 day off, I used to do teaching. And I ended up teaching in sort of 3 or 4 different schools around Bath. I ended up sort of doing 12 hours worth of teaching in my day off. So I ended up impacting quite a lot of people around the area to sort of show them that hey, women can do computing. I got a lot of praise from parents saying we really appreciate our sons seeing women achieve things. It shows them that this isn't just a space for them. Women are here too. I ended up moving to London. The interview process for that was quite interesting, that a lot of companies I interviewed with saw that I had spent 6 months teaching kids to code voluntarily and not earning any money as a negative. And Compare the Market, who I ended up working for, were the first company that sort of saw that as a positive. They really encouraged that, and they were sort of, we really think this is a great thing that you've done. Compare the Market for me was really great because they helped encourage and inspire me in my skills, and they sort of helped push me. So when I left, I had 2 really great offers from Facebook and Twitter. The Twitter offer was an Android developer role. They knew that I had some weaknesses, but really appreciated who I was and wanted to help me grow in a technical capacity. The Facebook offer was a different sort of career path. The offer was for a partner engineer, which means somebody that helps other people in an engineering capacity. So I was in media partnerships, and that meant helping the big media organizations with video infrastructure things. I ended up moving on from Facebook. I joined a company called Pusher. They have several libraries that help developers do things easier in apps. So, for instance, they have a push notifications library, which I originally joined. So it helps developers integrate push notifications into their apps. I thought this was a great move because I enjoy helping people as advocated in the partner engineering role. And I think joining the communication skills and the programming skills, fundamentally you're building software that other people are choosing to integrate into their apps. You have to have good quality tested code. And for the most part, that is public as well. So you can't hide anything at this point. And at the end of last year, I joined another startup called Bitrise. They primarily build a CI/CD service for mobile people, so that if you're continually integrating and continually testing your app on different devices, they help make that easier for people. They're also building an SDK to help engineers monitor the performance of their apps. So if your app is taking up this much memory this week and then X amount more next week, can we help you identify what those changes were? Can we help you have high performant apps so that your users and customers don't have any problems?
So, I'd love to ask you more about Facebook, but just before we touch on that, it's interesting because now you work in SDKs, right? And that's always been something really interesting to me because As a web developer or mobile developer or just most people working in tech, you're consuming the tools that other people make, to create software for consumers and businesses and stuff. And you're now creating tools for engineers.
I think it's really cool. I've kind of accidentally fallen into this, but I've done it before previously in my life. That at the end of the day, you're developing something that you would use. And I think that's much easier to write sort of documentation on, like, how would you use it? Like, what sort of things are you looking for? Like, how can we make this as easy for people, to integrate and to use, and having that conscious decision as to, what can we do to make this easier for people? How can we simplify our interfaces so that, things that might seem confusing to people are actually really straightforward. So you have to have a lot of consideration on, like, naming things, how you be conscious about what libraries you're integrating with, because if you integrate libraries that other people are also integrating and they are different versions, is that going to cause problems? So, like, there's a lot of, like, meta thinking that you have to sort of be conscious about and think about, and you can't just rush into things, if that makes sense.
Your time at Facebook, I mean, that must have been an extraordinary point in your career, because you had an offer from Twitter at the same time, which you turned down to, like, move to Facebook. I mean, what was that like? And then what was your experience at Facebook like? And then you also left.
I think the Facebook and Twitter thing was interesting. Like, I am very, very fortunate that both offered me a role. I had a weekend to kind of decide what I needed to do. I'd already accepted the Twitter offer, and I felt, if I was going to take the Facebook offer, I had to notify them as soon as possible so that they weren't led into believing that, I was going to turn up on day one. So I had a really guilt-racking weekend of just trying to work out which was the better move for me. At the time, like, Facebook was performing better, and it did seem like the safer bet. It had also been one of those companies that I had aspired to join, because Sheryl Sandberg, she's a COO. They are very good at the public diversity initiatives, so that it looks like they're doing a really great job internally of, hiring women, promoting women, advocating for women to lead and to succeed. However, I guess they're very good at the marketing, and when I joined, it was very different from the inside. So the first quarter that I joined, they had an internal tech conference, and I turned up. I enjoyed listening to what people were talking about at the company. Facebook do some very interesting things in London. However, as the day progressed, I realized that it was just 18 white men speaking to us. They had no women speakers, no people of color. And I ended up being the person that posted internally, being like, hey, like, I've only just joined this company, but, like, are women not achieving things here? Like, why are they not presenting? Why, like, what happened? What's gone wrong? And, the head of London came out and he apologized. He took personal responsibility and acknowledged that this was a problem. He hadn't noticed that it had been just men speaking. So, hopefully that's taught him, these things are easy to miss, but it's important not to miss them.
So moving on from that, you were always, apart from being an exceptional engineer, you were always really quite outgoing and social and, like, really connected to other people in the industry, in general. So how has, like, the last year or so of lockdown affected you? And, like, what do you think is or can be done?
So I think it's really hard. Like, I think, like a lot of people, I've really been struggling with the lack of socialness and everybody sort of being very self-isolated at this point. I don't, even remote companies are sort of saying this isn't how you usually do remote companies. Usually you can do, like, an offsite for a week where you get everybody together once a quarter. At least getting teams together, in a regular cadence seems to be an agreed, thing that people do. And, like, not being able to do that is really difficult. I think some things that we've done to sort of help, but, like, it's not, like, fully replicating, like, what an office was like, is creating smaller, like, niche interest groups on Slack. So these aren't groups that, everybody will be interested into, but if you can make enough small interest ones. So, for instance, we've got a Nintendo Switch group at work where there's, like, 10, 15 of us that have joined. And every other Tuesday we have a game time. So between 5 p.m. and 6 p.m., we've got calendar time blocked off to say, hey, what games do we want to play? Do we want to play a Mario Kart, tournament? And, open it up so that anybody in the company can join it. But it's a small enough niche group that people can sort of start friendships. And I think making it a regular cadence event is important, because if you make it a one-off event, people feel sad that they missed it. But if you reassure people and say, hey, actually, this is every Tuesday evening, people realize that, oh, actually, we can join the next one, and they can get involved with it.
You've come a long way in your career, and you've done exceptional things. How do you deal with challenges?
So I think challenges are a really difficult thing. I think the first thing that I did was find my people. So when I graduated university, I went to a really great conference called Write, Speak, Code. It was a conference in New York specifically for female engineers. And it was the first time that I'd met another developer that was kind of like me. I'd never worked or met with other other female engineers at all. And being a woman in tech at this point is still difficult. And I think a lot of people share, similar stories that I faced with my career going into tech. But I think finding these people are really important, because they will support and encourage you when things are challenging. So they'll pick you back up and say, look, this happens to everybody. It's not on you that these bad things have happened. They'll help encourage you to go through. But also, they're important to cheer you on when things are going really well.
And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing is you're saying that, it's other people that keep you motivated and productive.
Being collaborative and working with other people was the thing that I was looking for most. I don't really enjoy being in a basement on my own, just solidly working. I want to talk to people about the things that we're building. I want to get consensus on if we use this word for customers instead of this word, is that going to help people, integrate and use our product more easily? Doing that in isolation, I think, leads to weaker products that ends up not being so great for people to use. And I think fundamentally, it's having that communication with other people helps me as an engineer improve. I don't know everything. I don't admit to knowing everything. But that encouragement and sort of, hey, have you considered writing your code like this? Or have you heard about this new feature that we could use? I can't keep on top of everything myself. Having that collaborative, nature with other people helps everybody grow, if that makes sense.
Speaking of growing and collaborating and other people, you spent a lot of time mentoring and helping other developers. You were even a lecturer once upon a time.
Sure.
So can you tell me about that?
Sure.
What have you learned?
So I've helped out run breakfast clubs for primary school students, after school clubs for secondary school students, even becoming a lecturer for a while. I think moving to London, I've sort of focused more on teaching adults, but I think the underlying fundamentals are probably still the same. Most people that don't know tech assume that we know everything, and actually showing that we don't know everything is a really important skill. So helping out at CodeBar, I usually help out web development students, but as a mobile developer, sometimes students ask questions that I don't know the answer to. And I think that's really important for them to know that I don't know all the answers, but showing them how I would go about finding the answers by, searching on Google for specific things, going to Stack Overflow, I think is a really important skill. And it sort of went all the way back to sort of the primary students. They would ask really great questions, and sort of saying to them, I actually don't know the answer, but here's how we're going to find out the answer, really showed them it's within their realm of possibility to find out the answers, sort of giving them the skills to get their own answers themselves, rather than relying on other people to give them the answers all of the time.
What are you passionate about in your work?
I think it goes back to that communication and helping other people. I'm really conscious at this point of the pandemic that if we're all going remote, how are we going to help junior people level up to, become mids and senior engineers? I remember when I first started out, I needed to be sat near people, which I could ask, those questions that you think are really stupid, why are we doing this thing this way? And I really worry that if we're all becoming super remote and isolated, are those threads of communication still happening? Do junior people still feel empowered to ask those silly questions? Or because it's had to be a video conference that's set up, do they hold off on the difficult questions and then end up struggling even more and then potentially dropping out of tech, which would be really sad. So I think at this point, I'm really conscious of, how do we help those people not drop out? What sort of things do we need to put in place to help other people grow in this industry?
Do you think that you are witnessing that? Because I mean, yeah, when I think back to, all the time that I spent like mentoring other devs, I mean, that direct contact is probably the most important thing.
Yeah.
And do you think that's having an effect now?
I think it's really difficult because not all companies hire juniors and mid engineers. So, for instance, Bitrise hasn't hired anybody that's mid or junior. We only hire seniors at this point. So, I think that's true of a lot of other tech companies as well, that they're not willing to risk training new people up because they don't know how to do that right now. And it's we were talking about it yesterday inside Project Monday that senior engineers don't just grow on trees. They aren't just going to magically appear. Like, we have to put the effort in to grow people up if we expect to run sustainable companies. And I think a lot of companies aren't recognizing that this isn't sustainable. And at some point this will go kaput and, they won't be able to hire people. Or those of us that are lucky to have already become seniors, will be able to command our wages because there'll be just such desperation for them. So I think having some initiative earlier on before it becomes a problem.
And finally, can you tell me the joke of the show?
So my mum is she used to be a children's nurse. And as a children's nurse, you see children that are in hospital, probably having some operations or blood tests or not fun things happen to them. So my mum's job as a nurse is to do some of these things, but is also to set children at ease. And to do that, she needs a joke. So my mum has one joke that she can remember, and it goes like this: what do you get hanging in banana trees?
What do you get hanging in banana trees?
Yeah, what do you think you get hanging in banana trees, Sandra?
Bananas?
Incorrect. You get sore arms.
Okay.
It's not the best joke, but it helps put children at ease, and I think that's the one joke that my mum can remember.
And is that the one joke you can remember as well?
And it's the one joke I can remember because that's the only joke my mum knows. So
it's a suitably bad, good joke of the show.
Thank you very much. And thank you for Angie.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. Really means a lot to me.
Well, no, thank you for inviting us.
And that's all, folks. Thanks a lot for tuning in. For any more info, feedback, comments, or questions, please head on over to aheadintech.com and don't forget to subscribe.